morning.
by
Good
Good
afternoon. I'm
Samaritan
sorry.
Comfort
This morning was
Transportation.
morning.
Good Samaritan Comfort
And welcome to the
Transportation
Brenda
is one
Perryman
of
Show.
Metro Detroit's leading charter bus companies.
Table Talk with
safe,
Brenda
deluxe
Perryman,
transportation throughout
right
the
here on
US and
TV
Canada.
33
Good Samaritan
WHPR,
offers low prices and
Comcast
superior
20 in
service.
Detroit.
On board our free
And
motor
we
coach,
have a
you'll
guest
find
co-host
comfortable
with us
seating,
today, and we will
Wi-Fi, and a
introduce her
safe,
in just a
smooth
moment.
ride. So for all
I'd like
your
to
beach
say
travel needs,
congratulations
let
to
Good Samaritan
Tiffany
Transportation take you
McEvans,
there.
our
Check out our
attorney.
website
Her
at
grandmother
gscomforttransportation.com
turns 100 this
or call us
weekend,
now.
and she is in. They're having a little family reunion for the grandmother. 100 years old, totally blessed. And now my other co-host.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cheryl Ajamu, owner of the Ajamu Group. We produce the luncheon during the Detroit Auto Show, the Multicultural Media Luncheon.
And I'm Dr. Rose Moulton of Transcendent Life Counseling Services, clinical psychologist, author, and speaker.
Hi, I'm Verna Green. I'm a former broadcast manager, and I'm happy to join the crew today.
And I'm very happy for Verna to join the group today, because Verna is, let me make sure this is on. It is on.
We'll take care of it. Keep going.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen. Verna is a woman of history, and I say this because, Verna, why don't you tell them your former position?
Well, for many years, I was vice president and general manager of WJLB and WMXD here in Detroit, and had a great time. We did some wonderful things, had a lot of fun with Coats for Kids and Family Fun Day and many other
Didn't you
community-oriented.
start Sister Strut?
Well, I started Sisters Moving Up. Sister
okay.
Strut kind of evolved from there.
Yes, so
I believe Ellen Hill did that.
right. So you did a lot of things with WJLB and Mix
Right.
92.3.
Awesome.
In fact, the commercial, we had a great time filming that commercial
Yes, we did.
in your house.
Yes.
Well, Verna, here on the show, we have a tradition that we start. We started where we take a little piece from Ken Coleman's book, On This Day, An African American Life in Detroit. And on this day in 1938, Don Davis was born.
Wow.
Raised in the Brewster Projects, Davis will become a producer at Memphis's legendary Stax Records. In 1980, he will become chairman of the black-owned and Detroit-based First Independent Bank. And I have to give you one more, because this is close to my heart. In 1964, on this day, Baby Love by the Supreme. Baby Love, my baby love. I love that. By the Supreme kicks off a 4-week run as the nation's #1 pop song. Not just rhythm and blues,
Yeah,
pop.
pop. That's huge.
Recorded at the Motown Records label and written and produced by the prolific production team of Holland Dozier Holland. The track is the vocal trio's #1 hit. Baby Love will be considered one of the most popular songs of the late 20th century. It ranks at number 324 on the Rolling Stone list of the 500 greatest songs of all time.
Awesome.
So much history was made in the Motown studios. And just a reminder to everybody, my new book, Mood Swings and Magic Carpet Rides, that's out. And it's available on, it's a book of poetry. And I've been getting good reviews from it, and it is going to be, it is at Amazon.com.
It makes a great stocking stuffer.
It's a
Well,
stocking
mommy.
stuffer, and you could get a little wisdom out of it, if I must say so myself. Also, Cheryl Ajamu has been telling you that she has the Ajamu Group luncheon, and she has an announcement to make today.
I do. As many of you know, the Ajamu Group brings in a celebrity every year for the Detroit Auto Show. We partner with the Auto Show, and we do an Academy Award style event called the Multicultural Media Luncheon, where we honor ethnic groups in the auto industry. And this year we're proud to announce that Stephen A. Smith from ESPN will be our keynote speaker. And as
Isn't he the guy who has opinions?
lots of opinions. He has a radio show on ESPN, and he also appears on First Take. the television show on ESPN. So tickets go on sale November 1st. You can go to ajimagroup.com. If you can't spell that, you can Google Multicultural Media Luncheon, and the information is there on the website. Tickets usually go pretty fast, and we hope to sell it out again.
Well, I'm excited
Sure.
about it. I'll be there.
Yes, you will.
Now, let's get into some national news. We know that the health care plan was launched October 1st. You know, they call it Obamacare, but I prefer to call it the Affordable Health Plan. And it hasn't worked. The computer hasn't worked. Verna, could you speak a little bit to this?
Well, it was very disappointing news. You know, you go through a strategic planning process for a project this huge, and clearly implementation has to be a very big part of that whole plan. And it seems that someone dropped the ball on this after President Obama and his supporters were able to get this thing through Congress and Senate and to get it implemented. The fact that the enrollment system has been so flawed, someone has to account for this. For a project this big, you don't just start out and letting everybody across the country enroll. You have to have some tests done to make sure that the equipment is working, that the data processing is working in itself, that people are able to act on the data that's generated. And it doesn't appear that this happened with this very major, life-changing system. Someone has to answer for that. I don't know if it's the woman whose name that's been bandied about so often,
Catherine
but
Sebelius?
somewhere the system broke down, and it's going to take a while for the system to be functional. I'm hoping that the American people will display some patience, because the Affordable Health Care Act and the plan that came from the act is a very good plan. But, as you know, the little devil in the details around the implementation and the enrollment of this system has been flawed. Any of you who have had to implement any kind of data information system understand how complicated this whole process is, and how the danger of the shortcuts that were taken can impact the entire system. And that's what's happened now, and it's given the Republicans untold glee.
Not that they needed an
Right,
excuse, right?
Right.
But hopefully, with all of the experts who are now involved in trying to fix this system, can do it before the end of the year.
I wonder if any of our viewers have tried to log on to, what is the address? Something.gov.
Yeah,
I don't know the
the
website.
health exchange
Yeah.
system.
Yeah.
And it's such an attractive looking homepage. But when you go on now, Rose, you said that you had to try something out one time.
Yeah, I do contractual work for the feds, actually, as it relates to mental health issues. And probably about 4 years ago, they implemented a national program. Before that, it was just statewide program. They implemented a national program, and they invited me to be one of the pilot testers of it. And that entailed almost 8 months of me by myself. No one, a few other folks in other states, but just a few people selected to be part of a pilot program to try it out and report back the bugs, the kinks, what you like, what you didn't like, before they rolled it out to everyone. And this is, even though it's a federal program for all 50 states, it's still it only relates to mental health issues, so it's still on a smaller scale than this huge national health exchange program. And even 4 years down the line, there's still updates. And we all of us are familiar enough with computers to know that even the apps they put out now, there are always so much
Updated.
testing that's
Yeah.
going on, and updates that's
And
going
even on your phone, they update.
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, like Verna said, someone really dropped the ball, and it's going to be interesting. I guess the testifying is going on next week
And
regarding
people
it.
are passing the blame around in response to some questions. Ms. Campbell, who is they've been working with it. She says, we're not responsible for end-to-end testing of the whole system. Everybody's just passing the buck because
Yeah.
I know some heads have got to roll.
They should. They should roll.
And I'm just wondering how many people, because I know people who want to log on and want to get, they don't have insurance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I hear that some people, they get a pretty cheaper price for insurance. I don't know. That's why I asked if any of our viewers have ever tried to log on. And I just hope it works because it is it's part of his legacy and everything too.
Absolutely.
Well, it's essential that it works because there are people in this country who desperately need this. People who've had pre-existing conditions that have not been addressed through the bureaucracy of the healthcare system, and this is an opportunity for those needs to be met, and to have that sabotage really by a technical flaw is unforgivable.
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Well, here's hoping it gets done, really.
Yeah, well, USA
Hopefully.
Today, I think I told you, just sent the alert out that says they hope that everything should be resolved by the end of November.
Whew. That's still another month.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think that's ambitious, but we'll see. I guess if
Well,
they're working around the clock.
The plan has been decades long in coming, and although it is inconvenient and unfortunate that this glitch has occurred, in the end, if we can get the system operational, things should be okay.
You know, it seems
A year from now, maybe this may not matter.
It seems
Yeah.
the word for the week is glitch. I have heard that word at least 1,000
Yeah.
times this week. Haven't you
Oh,
heard
yes,
it?
on the news all day. Yes.
All
Yes.
the news. Let's talk about the glitch. And then with other things too, people are saying, oh, I had a glitch here and a glitch there. I'm just wondering, that has really made it into pop culture right now. And like you say, I just hope we can come to some solution. Of course, President Obama did say you could still call in. Did any of you hear anything
Yeah.
about that?
I
Yes.
heard that as
Yeah.
well.
But I don't know if anybody, I don't know anyone who has tested it. Do you?
No,
Yeah.
that is
I don't
called
know.
in.
Yeah.
Right. Well, he said that you could do it the old-fashioned way. He called it the. Isn't that something that calling in for stuff
That's
is now
amazing.
the
Yeah.
old-fashioned way? I remember I used to call in to pay my Edison bill. They take it out your checking account. I mean, you call it now. You just do it over the computer.
That's right.
I
And,
think our expectations now are so high as to what technology can do in terms of saving time to get things done, that when something doesn't
quick.
work exactly right, we think it's the end of the world.
I always say we're in that short attention span society now. Everything has to be immediate. Well, something that really got me this week, as being a former teacher, is the fact that 2 teachers were killed this week. One was killed by a 14-year-old, and another one, young man, and another one was killed by a 12-year-old young man.
Wow. Do you think it's video games?
I was talking about Call of Duty yesterday, and the other one. What's the other one?
Grand Theft Auto?
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
another one,
Grand
too.
Theft Auto.
Yeah.
I don't know. We're thinking it might, the sensitivity factor maybe not be there. But let's talk about this. The 14-year-old, well, the teacher, he stayed after school for the teacher to help him with his math. They say he was a pretty bright student, played soccer, had lived in Tennessee, as a matter of fact. And then he'd been there. He was the star of the soccer team. And he went into the bathroom and took a box cutter and cut her throat. Now, I'm wondering, I said, was this the plan? All day to wait until after school or whatever? Because somebody heard the teacher say, if you stay after, I'll
Yeah.
help you.
Yeah, because that was asked that day. You know, why did he even have a box cutter? Where did he
That's
get that
what
Yeah.
I'm
from?
saying.
You know,
Yeah.
I just have a sinking feeling that there's more to this story.
I did too.
It's just a sinking gut feeling
It
that
doesn't make
we're not
sense.
hearing
It doesn't make
everything, and
sense.
more is going to come out.
Yeah.
I think it came to me yesterday, and I wasn't going to even say it.
I know where you're going, but
But I was saying him bringing that to school and everything, but what kind of balances out my suspicion that makes it one hand suspicious, other hand not, is the fact that he took her purse and took her credit card and went to a show, and he's out at 12 something at night.
Yeah. Wow.
He bought popcorn
Yeah.
with her credit card.
Yeah, yeah.
What I mean,
Well, a couple of observations, and one is how are parents now preparing to deal with the rage that seems to be in some of their children? Obviously, these two students had rage. I don't know if the rage had been shown in other instances, but clearly they were raging to do this kind of violence. And what is a parent to do? What is a teacher to do in that kind of situation? I mean, they're basically in an environment where they assume safety. They used to assume safety. Now they can't assume safety. What can administration or law enforcement or
Society as a whole.
society
yeah.
as a whole do to keep both the students and the teachers safe?
well, before we even talk about that, and that's something I want to talk about within this segment, we're to talk about the 12-year-old seventh grader who brought a gun that he got from home
Yeah.
to school. He wounded a couple of classmates, and the reason why the teacher was killed was the teacher was trying to protect the kids. The NRA said teachers should all have a gun in the classroom and have it out. I mean, seriously, I just read this. I could not have been a teacher and done that. Number one, I'm clumsy. I would have tripped and I probably shot myself. But sometimes students can make you a little angry. And if you don't have a good clamp on it, you know, here I go. But no, serious, on the serious side, this man had been, this math teacher, both of them were math teachers,
Yeah.
by the way. This man had been through the war, and he comes home in his teaching job in a middle school, and he is killed.
Yeah, how ironic is that?
So back to Verna's thing, what are parents to say? What are parents to do?
Now, when you say parents of just in
The
general, or of these kids who are committing these
Well,
offenses?
Parents in general.
Yeah, parents in general. Because a lot of these kids who are doing these, you know, again, this is rage is a mental health issue.
Right.
It starts at home. You know, there are things going on at home that aren't being addressed. I oftentimes say, and as an educator, I taught at the college level, so it was beyond the K through 12 years. But I take that back, I worked in a youth jail that had a school there for a while. And unfortunately, in a lot of segments of society, there's more emotional needs that need to be addressed in the school. Like their teachers are doing more emotional type work than they have the opportunity to do the academic work.
and the expertise to do.
And yeah, because they're not trained. That's not their training. That's not their background. And I know my daughter came home the other day, and I don't know if you heard about it, but because your grandson is in elementary school, but there was one of her classmates jumped out the second-story window trying to kill himself.
What?
A 12-year-old
At North?
at Norup International, and the principal sent an email out to all of the parents letting us know it would be grief counselors. Luckily, unfortunately, he just broke his leg, I believe. But this was a kid who was distraught enough, you know, when my daughter came home and told me about it, and she said all the teachers closed the blinds so they couldn't look outside at what had occurred. You know, she said, Mom, we just were talking, said he must have been really depressed. So they're trying to process it as 11 and 12-year-olds. What would bring a kid to do this? Now, you know, oftentimes rage is, from a psychological standpoint, it's just depression going outward.
Right.
You know, and a lot of times, especially men and boys, their depression is, you know, shot out to the world. Whereas women tend to, when they become depressed, withdraw, you know, it goes in.
Internalize,
It's
they
internalized. So it's just a lot of mental health issues that needs to have awareness, more, you know, light and less stigma brought to them, because we can see here it's getting younger and younger and younger.
Well, you know, a lot of the high schools have, you know, the security equipment at the entrances. Unfortunately, it looks like that's going to be a basic requirement going all the way down to elementary
That's a good
school.
point.
Yeah.
So metal detectors are maybe standard operating equipment at the elementary levels.
I'm wondering how the 12-year-old got access to the gun. And another thing that bothers me was the fact that after he had shot the 3 people, he turned the gun on himself. How did he know to do that? I mean, I say how did he know to do that because so many people who take that route will end up killing themselves.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, you can watch enough television to
I was
see
just gonna
those
say,
things played out.
Yeah, you saw a lot of the. Some of the shows on TV are so graphic now. I mean, they are just so graphic.
And
it-
parents are watching it with their kids
Yeah.
there, and it's not a second
Yeah.
thought about it.
Yeah. It's
Well, a lot of the kids now have TVs in their rooms, and they're watching things that parents are unaware of. And there's no discussion about what they've seen. There's just that image that's locked into their minds, and they see some of those images as solutions to their problems.
Well, I had my kids all psyched out about our ratings because, with cable, they turn it on, oh no, that's rated R, we can't watch it. They really thought I was really policing that.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you have to talk to your children about that, about what's inappropriate, and because a lot of them are not able to decide what is real, what is not.
That's right. That's right.
And I remember there was a show when Verna and I were little girls called You Asked For It.
Yeah.
Remember that, Verna?
I certainly do.
And they sawed a woman in half. Do you know I couldn't sleep? No, seriously. I thought that woman was, and then they separated the 2 pieces. And I said, God, oh my God, no. And I was scared to ask my parents. So for years, I thought this woman was really cut in half.
Yeah.
And so I'm just using that as an illustration of how a child doesn't know better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And let me add to that, even news stories, even watching the news. I tell a lot of my patients when they come to me who are depressed, stop watching the news. They will say they watch the morning news, the noontime news, the 5 o'clock news, read a paper. They watch CNN, they watch, and so that just validates everything. And if you have young kids, which a lot of folks do, sitting around, and they're looking at all these stories, I mean, look at the stories we're covering, the local
Yeah.
stories we're covering. They're taking all this in, and it just reinforces the world is a bad place. This is just the reality that
Well,
they
what
live
does
in.
a parent tell their children in terms of, what did you tell Gabby about the boy jumping out the
Yeah,
window?
well, we talked about it, and fortunately, with her having a psychologist as a mother, they've been privy to different mental health topics and discussions before. But I let her talk, and she just processed. We talked about it, and he must have been depressed. I said, yeah. Was there any indication? No, Mom. And they didn't know the name. She said, we're told that it's potentially this kid's name, but then when she came home the next day, she confirmed that it was him.
Well, we have a caller on the line, Brother Jeff. Good afternoon. Jeff? Hello? Hello, Jeff? Well, call back.
Yes, hopefully it
And
will.
so, but look at the parents who've had to deal, well, case in point. In I think it was 84 or 85. I thought it was 84, but it might have been, I don't. Well, we had a shooting when I was teaching at Highland Park Community High School, and a young man was killed. And this was early in the morning. I walked in about 5 minutes to 8. Classes started at 8. And this young man ran down the steps. He was screaming, get an ambulance, get an ambulance. I went into the main office, and all of a sudden somebody said, he's got a gun. And I remember all of us hitting the floor. And what happened was a young man had been bullied, and the young man who was bullying him went up on the floor near his locker. But that day, that young man brought his father's .38.
To school.
And when the guy came up to him, he pulled around and he just shot him point blank, just a couple of feet away.
Yeah.
And can you imagine, that hall was crowded, and the students, the panic that ensued. I never want to see anything like that, but that was another passage where we had to go into some real realities, and the young man was killed. And everybody panicked, even the principal. He said, if you want to go home, go. You know, it was like that. It was just a terrible, terrible day. And then we as teachers had to sit up and talk to the kids who remained, and we were traumatized ourselves.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So when you talk about, oh, Brother Jeff is back on the line. Good afternoon, Brother Jeff. Hello? Hello? Brother Jeff?
Okay, I'm not hearing.
Oh, I
I'm not
hear
hearing
you.
her.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I hear you.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, I do. I do hear you. I don't know why you can't hear us. You can't hear.
Okay. I just would like to piggyback, Ms. Spearman. I just like to piggyback on some of the conversation that you're speaking about the mental capacity and a lot what the panel has said about television. There was a wise man back in the early 1930s when television first came out. He talked about how the devil would entertain us in our living rooms, and he was referring to television. And through television today, when you think about it, when we were coming up as kids, you might have had one television in the house.
Right.
And that particular television only carried 4 channels, which was CBS, ABC, NBC, and CKLW.
Right.
And so you didn't have you didn't watch TV the way people watch TV today. And so today, now you can stay up 24 hours. You got over 1,000 channels. And they go from murder to taking the clothes off to everything that everybody's being exposed today. So a lot of our young children are being exposed to things that we never were exposed to. You know, you can imagine, understand, as the sister said, about everybody having their own individual TVs in their own rooms now. You know, so we have to look at the effect of this. And not only that, understand our kitchens. Basically understand we don't know what we're feeding our children. You know, we basically understand, go to the store, we buy something that's already cooked up. We don't know if it's genetically modified. We don't know if it's genetically engineered. And we're just doing things just following a system that's actually destroying most of us or whatever. And until we get back, understand it, to researching genetically modified foods and genetic engineering and whatnot, and also when you find out about the basis of those inoculation, those shots and whatnot, you find out that on those bases, most of those shots, they're carrying mercury, they're carrying lead, they're carrying products that is used for antifreeze, a product that they use, understand, for embalming fluid, and we don't know. We just assuming that they have our best interests, and so it's going to continue to get worse, Mrs. Spearman.
Well, I appreciate that, and you called for everybody to start doing the research, more research on this, and I really appreciate your call.
Let me say a little bit about research.
Thank you.
Back in the 60s.
You have a blessed day, sister, and the rest of your guests also.
Thank you.
Okay. Back in the 1960s, I think it was CBS that did some audience research, and the question was, what would you most like to see on TV that you're not seeing now? Because they wanted to shape their programming to address audience needs. The number one answer to that question was, believe it or not, a live execution.
Wow. What year was this?
This was in the 60s.
Okay.
Now, of course, CBS, the standards back then, of course, that wasn't going to fly. They were not going to put a live execution on television.
But they did show
However-
Dr. Kevorkian killing that man on television.
Right. So we don't have a live execution that is done by the law enforcement system. However, if you look at the dramatic series that are on television right now, on any network or cable or satellite channel, you are seeing executions. It's done in a
Repeatedly.
fictitious manner, but the image, that caustic image, is still there.
And on top of that, on some shows that I've seen, you don't see how the person dies, but you see how they're laying there dead
Yeah.
blood or throat cut. They show
Yeah.
these things. I'm gonna tell you, back in the day when people got shot, wasn't even a bullet hole in their suit. I mean, seriously, on Superman, they shot people all the time, and there was no bullet hole, no blood. You didn't see blood or anything, and it was fine with me.
They didn't have the
But right now it's different. Dr. Rose, those games like Grand Theft Auto and what was the other one we said? Call of Duty.
Call of Duty.
What, do you think that has an influence?
You know, one of the things Brother Jeff, he talked about a lot of different things, and we are too, television. We're just talking about so many different variables that go into this. But to answer your question, it potentially can have an influence. However, there are other variables that go in that. We can't say that it's not a causal, cause and
Right.
effects relationship. So we can't say the video games cause violence. We can say in certain segments and population of individuals that can be a contributor, but it's other variables that go into that. Are they being monitored? Is there strong parental presence in the home that's talking about different issues or what have you? A lot of these kids are raising themselves. A lot of these kids are depending on these games and the television programs and what they see outside or on the news or wherever to kind of guide them as what's reality, what's right, what's wrong, what's the proper course of action to take with things. So many different variables to take into account. We can't just say that it's video games. We can't just say it's television. Do they have an influence? Is there, is there some type of relationship between children who expose themselves to a great deal of violence and maybe that's their main exposure? You have to be well-rounded, and a lot of these kids these days are not well-rounded.
Well, like you have children, well, my children are grown, but I have grandchildren, nieces, nephews, everything like that, and Verna, grandchildren. What do we tell them? What do you suggest that we say? Because I talked to my son about this yesterday, and I said, Ryan, did you ever notice that I never bought you a gun? I never bought a toy gun for him on purpose. He said, Ma, I know, but I thought that there are a million things you could do. You don't have to be running around shooting people. That was my deal. What are other things? Oh, and it all comes back also to the kitchen table. Sitting there talking to your children, don't you think, Verna?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
When dinosaurs walked the earth, and we watch cartoons a lot.
Yeah.
And when I think back of those cartoons, the cartoons were violent. You had people
Yeah.
hitting each
Especially
other in the head. But we could say that's not real. That's only pretend. Well, now you've got images of real people hitting, and there's not enough about the consequence of these actions on TV. So the kids don't get to see the whole story. They get to see the violent act and maybe a little bit of sorrow, but they don't get to see how a family lives on after a loved one has been killed. So it's important that if your child or niece or nephew happen to see some of these images on TV, to talk to them and talk them through how bad this really is and the sorrow that comes from such an act. Maybe they'll have an understanding. Most kids don't want to see people be sad. Now there are some kids who have some pathologies where maybe that doesn't fit, but most kids do not want to see other folks, especially other kids, be sad. So it's important to talk through what they've just seen.
And Rose, you said rage, and it had to be some rage for this guy to take this box cutter too,
Yes,
Oh.
absolutely.
to cut someone's throat, and put her in a recycle bin
Yeah.
and take her out to the woods back there.
You know what I would love to see, because we're going to hear more and more about this story as the weeks and months go on. Just like we heard more and more about the people who did the mass
Sandy
murders
Hook.
last year. Just
Right.
like we heard more and more about the guy who went in the movie theater. What's needed is we need to just stop evaluating and getting information and implement some type of plan that's going to prevent
Mental
these
health.
things
Yeah.
from happening, because they're happening and we see them. And it's not to say necessarily they're happening more often. We just live in a society also where we have access where we get instant news, we can get it on the internet, the TV, everywhere. But again, what happens when kids see this. And I told my daughter this. You asked what was the conversation like when she told me about the boy that jumped out the window, the 12-year-old. I say, Gabby, I said, be aware, because when this happens in school, oftentimes you have copycats. When people attempt to commit suicide or suicides are successfully done, school districts will report, now all of a sudden, within a week span, there's been other kids who are attempting this, because it's, and you have a story later on, I see under social, it's a mirror effect that's had, you know, so it's the same thing with all this stuff we see on television. Oftentimes these kids can take that in and say, okay, that's an option that I didn't consider before, and now it's there for me.
Yeah, well, I'm just afraid with even grade school kids coming to school with guns, and parents, if you have guns, you need to lock them away securely.
Yes.
I mean, for this child to be able to get it, he must have been able to just have
Access it.
access.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
access
And
to it.
access to it.
Yes, sure.
Oh.
Let's go to another quick story. I mean, we did talk about that a long time, about Americans not expecting to retire.
Yeah.
There's a study that says that Americans are not expecting to ever retire. Let's talk about that a little bit, because you all said you weren't going to retire.
I think maybe 10 or 12 years ago, I came to that conclusion just because it just, you know, just the way the market has been just over the years. It's always been like where you know, it wasn't like when my grandmother was living, you know, she would talk about, oh, you know, when your grandfather retires, you know, we're going to get this pension. It's going to come every month. We're going to do this. We're going to remodel. We're going to, you know, and I was like, I don't know if that's going to be there for me, because, you know, I could see it then that, you know, as I saw people older than me, they were saying, you know, something's not right with the money, with my money. It's just not stretching as far.
Well, they say Wells Fargo did a survey, and it said that 37% of the people don't ever expect to retire, but instead have to work until they are too sick or die. Now, as an artist myself, we don't ever finish. We don't ever. I'll probably drop dead on a movie set or on a stage. I mean,
And the show will still go on, because
I
that's
can
what
be
she
on
is.
TV and things like that. But no, seriously, yeah, the show gotta go on. But I mean, seriously, you have to do something, because sometimes, I mean, even if it's an activity you like and you start making a little money from it. Verna, do you have a thought on this yourself?
Well, there are a couple of things that are happening in the economy now. You know, the U.S. economy technically has improved. However, for the first time in history, it's been a jobless recovery. So you have a lot of people who are out of work a lot sooner than they expected to be. So the whole thought of retirement is just not even possible, because they can't even get a job. So, you know, we've had incredible technological advances, but some of those advances have been at the expense of jobs for just working people. If you don't have a degree or an advanced degree, and sometimes that doesn't even help, you're just out of luck. And there doesn't seem to be a system in place just yet to address that. So, yes, there are a lot of people who won't retire, because a lot of people, unfortunately, may not ever be able to find work.
Wow.
Yeah, there is so, I mean, just think about, I was in Birmingham a couple of weeks ago, and, you know, there's parking structures, and there used to be people in those booths to take your money when you park. There's nobody now. I mean, it's just a machine you put, and I'm like, oh, that's some more jobs that are gone. I mean, they're not going to be replaced. They're going to use that computer.
I would be interested also to know the age group of, like, the research participants that they questioned for this, only because, and I say
Well,
that
here it is right here. It was conducted by Harris Interactive of 1,000 middle-class Americans between the ages
25 and 75. Okay. And I, you know, and the reason I ask that, and that's a wide span right there, but the reason I ask is because you consider, like, my parents' generation, and they expected, if they work for an industry for 25, 30 years, like, you know, you were saying, you retire, you get your pension, and that's the way it went. That's just not the reality
Anymore.
That's not the reality, and so that's not the reality. Even though I saw it with parents, that's not the reality for myself. So I've always thought, okay, find something you love doing because you're going to be doing this for the rest of your life. And so that goes into my feeling of I won't retire now. If I'm fortunate enough to win a Powerball, mega Powerball. We all can retire somewhere together, but until that happens, we just have to keep moving on, keep doing it, and just find work that you love or something that you're good at. And it's no such thing, in my opinion, as having just one job anymore. Since I finished with my graduate work, I've always taught, ran a private practice, spoke, wrote books. It's just 4 or 5 different streams of income that a lot of people that I know can relate to that just goes into your work.
Absolutely.
Well, the other thing that's changed is the corporate practices now related to workers and what happens after they leave active employment. You go back to up to like the 60s and 70s, corporations felt some responsibility for taking care of employees after they left active employment. That's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
So you get a 401k or an IRA or some other thing. Pension plans are going the way of the dodo bird.
I think about the Detroit pensioners. People are playing with their pensions right now. They're threatening to take parts of them away.
Absolutely.
I mean, people worked, they retired, and now they're worried about their health care and everything like that. That is so unjust to me. That's like a big nightmare.
Yeah, having the rug
Yeah.
pulled from underneath you.
Yeah, something that you thought you could count on.
And then when I heard Kevin Orr on that horrible 60 Minutes piece, did any of you see that?
No,
I
I
saw
didn't see it.
portions of it. I did not see all of it.
I mean, he acted like it was no big thing.
Well, unfortunately, that is a corporate response, and it is becoming a predominant response. That, I have responsibility somewhat for you while you are actively employed and bringing value to the corporation. But once you cease to provide value to the corporation, I mean, we have no more relationship. That's the predominant thinking now.
Gee, I mean, it's just when you work, your pension goes towards, you.
Yeah.
I mean, just like my pension is being taxed because it wasn't taxed initially, but it's being taxed because, what did he say? He says, well, think about the senior who lives next door to you who's working. Well, I mean, I feel like I'm paying double. It was a nightmare about it. But anyway,
Pensions are going away.
I see.
They're
I
going,
see.
the concept of a pension no longer has relevance in the corporate setting.
Yeah, and even in government settings, I know when years ago, before I finished my graduate work, I worked for the state of Michigan and I had a 401k. And now, I think it started probably about 9-10 years ago, people going into, they have to provide their own. Like, they're not giving them a
They're not
pension.
doing
That's
matches
not
either.
doing matches, they're not doing anything. You're on your own with that. So that concept is a thing of the past.
Right. So the whole concept of work and what positive consequence comes from work, it's all changing, and it's very difficult because we're caught kind of in the middle of the transition process. It's very difficult to deal with.
Very difficult. Now let's get into a little local news. Yesterday, Representative Conyers, he endorsed Benny Napoleon as mayor, and he said he did it because he's one of our own. Do you believe that will make a big difference? Anybody?
I
don't
don't.
know.
I don't.
No,
I don't know.
no.
I don't know.
say no also.
One of the challenges right now for any elected official or someone who wishes to be an elected official is that so much of the population is so turned off with politicians in general. The fact that someone says, "Oh, I support this guy," it's a big so what. There have been so many instances of disappointments that endorsements now, they may, if you have a certain voting block that you're trying to address, and this is their hot button, then it means something. So you still have to seek those endorsements. It's just that the endorsements don't carry the weight that they used to carry.
Okay, I agree with that because Kim Worthy endorsed Mr. Napoleon too, and a lot of people kind of just didn't pay attention
Right,
to
it's
it.
a big so what.
Yeah, yeah. It's
So, looking at the fact that the voter turnout is so drastically low, clearly these endorsements are falling on some deaf ears.
and the individuals who are committed to going out and voting, like you said, a low percentage of the population. At this point in time, I would think the majority of them have their minds made
They're
up.
made up.
Yeah.
And a lot of the people who got absentee ballots have already
They've already
cast
voted.
Yeah,
their,
yeah.
they've already cast their ballots.
Why do you
so
think it took so long?
I don't know. That's a good point.
Hadn't
Because
thought about that.
we're talking what?
A
2
week and a
weeks?
half.
Yeah.
No,
A week and a half now.
Wow.
Like you said, that should have happened
Well,
before absentee ballots. if you thought it would
there
make
can
a
be
difference.
so many reasons. It could be an oversight in the campaign manager. It could be a reluctance of the endorser. There are many, many reasons
Yeah.
why that could happen.
Political, right?
Oh, politics. Or I heard someone on TV 33 call it politricks. That indeed can be a word for it. Now, we have a lot to talk about on this issue of carjacking. The police chief said, well, he caught some flack because he believed he was just about to get carjacked, and he sped away, which I would have done especially if I didn't see a gun. I would have. Somebody comes near your car, you drive out off. Now, just so happens, ladies and gentlemen, two of my co-hosts here today each have been carjacked. Rose, would you tell your story quickly?
Yeah, it was. I was 16 at the time, working co-op. So I went to high school half a day and went to work job the other half, and it was broad daylight, 12:30 in the afternoon, and I'm pulling onto the street, which is a pretty much not heavily trafficked street. And I open my door, and there's somebody there to open it for me, and he has a knife in his hand, and he tells me to get out. And there was a little tussle because I couldn't get out, and I was afraid, and I tried to fight him off, and it wouldn't work, and I eventually had to jump over into the passenger seat and get out that way. But, he took the car, which was a stick shift. He could barely drive, so he ended up totaling it about a mile away. But before he totaled it, my coworkers came out to surround the car because I'm banging on the window, the door, screaming, and they have
What were
this,
you screaming?
come help me open the door.
That door.
Yeah,
I
they
thought you
had
were talking about
no,
the car
the car door.
door.
Because they would have to buzz me in.
Right.
So I was still outside with this guy, and it was just he and I.
God.
It was a frightening experience. And I know, Werner, you're going to share yours, but it was traumatic. And I, had flashbacks for a while. And even to this day, and this is many years later, we talk about 25 years later, to this day, I get in the car and it's like automatic, I have to lock my door. If I park somewhere, automatically I'm looking around before I get out.
Yes. Verna?
Well, this goes back about 8 years ago, and I was going to, it was Black History Month. I was going to a discussion group in Indian Village in Detroit, and there was a professor there. He had taken a group on a trip to look at some Black history sites in Canada, and we were all supposed to meet back at his house for a discussion at 7 o'clock. Well, I get to the house at 7 o'clock. The bus with the tours isn't there yet. So I said, oh, okay, well, they'll probably be here in a few minutes. I'll just sit here. Bad mistake. It was dark. So I decided to check my calendar and all this stuff in the car while I'm waiting. Meanwhile, there's a knock on the window, and it startled me. It was this young man, and he's beckoning, and, what do? Let the window down so I can hear him. And he says, leave the keys in the car and get out. And I said, get out for what?
Because it takes a minute to process. What's going on here?
And then it finally dawned on me, he's going to take my car. And sure enough, that's what happened. Now,
Did he have a weapon?
he kept holding his pocket. So I didn't know if he had a gun or not. And I was not about to find out just to save a car. You can always get
Absolutely.
another car.
Right.
So I did get out of the car, and he drives, and just as he's driving away, the bus with the doors come, but he drives around them on the grass and gets away. Now, that, fortunately, I was not harmed. Fortunately, I had my purse and could sneak it under my coat and take
good.
it out and get out of the car. And I had my phone, so I could call the police right away. But that was a learning experience for me, because now I learned you do not sit in a car by yourself for anything. What I should have done was driven to McDonald's or driven to another friend in Indian Village who lived there. Do something so that you're not sitting there as a target in the car. I also learned that OnStar, even if you don't subscribe to it, the police can turn it on even if you haven't paid for it, and they were able to find the car.
Wow.
But I was very fortunate, because back then, they were just taking cars. Now there tends to be more of a willing or
Not
to
a
hurt
second
you in
thought.
some way. So I try to use a lot more caution now in terms of sitting in a car.
I'll share this even at a light now.
Yes.
I will give myself room. I won't drive up on a car. So if someone, I won't be pinned in. I'm going to figure out a
Leave
way
a
so
car
if
on.
something happens, I can get away, or drive off or accelerate, because you have to be aware. It's just, and when you have those experiences, you are, you've tuned in now to the potential that exists.
There were some interesting racial ironies in my situation. I'm going to the home of a white professor or former professor in Indian Village, kind of upscale neighborhood in Detroit. I am jacked by a young black man. And by the way, I'm supposed to be at this Indian Village place to discuss Black history. And the police officers who came to take the report are two young white guys. So just all the symbolism that's involved in that whole transaction was really stunning. And for the longest time, I felt guilt myself for being so stupid and sitting there. But I did learn from that.
Well, there was another carjacking yesterday, which I found to be crazy. The lady was up on Jefferson at the BP, and she was getting gas, and the guy comes up to her. This is 8 o'clock in the morning, so it was light outside. And he wanted to carjack her, and so she just let him have the car. Well, a couple of witnesses saw it, and they followed him. And he went to the Edison Marina, and he jumped out of the car and let the car go into the water. And
That's not the end of
and right, it's not the end of it, because one of the witnesses gets out, and the witness has a gun, and he and the
takes the
carjacker
gun.
start fighting over the gun. The witness gets shot, and then he takes the carjacker takes the witness's car. My daughter works up near there, and she says at that gas station they have a big sign that says, "Bring your purse inside with you," because one of her co-workers, called herself locking her door and running in, and ran in, and then her window got smashed with a brick. And somebody just reached in and got her bag that quick and started running. And what can you do? So it's at epidemic proportions, I believe.
Well, I'd like to, if I can, comment on the police
about
chief.
a minute and a half.
I want to commend the police chief for using good sense and taking himself out of a potentially dangerous situation and not overreacting and shooting the guy that he thought looked suspicious.
Because if he would have shot him, we'd still be talking.
Yeah, there was no crime committed,
Yeah.
There was no crime, but it was
but he
suspicion.
knew he was suspicious.
It was suspicion. I mean, you can't always arrest somebody for suspicion, even though people do with stop and frisk. But that's a whole nother conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, we're coming to the end of our hour. We didn't even get through everything. We had
There'll be other weeks.
I mean, we had so much to discuss, but I'd like to thank our guest co-host, Verna Green.
Thank you,
Thank you for
Verna.
inviting me. It was fun.
Oh, this was
Welcome.
great. And I'd like to invite you back for next week's Brenda Perryman show at 9 a.m. and then Table Talk with Brenda Perryman in the afternoon at 1. And tell your friends. We're going to have some surprises coming up. We're going to be doing some remotes also. So I hope to see you next week, Friday. And thank you, Cheryl. Thank you, Rose. And thank you, Verna. And thank you, TV 33. Goodbye. Have
Let's
a good
bring the
weekend.
issues to the table on table